So today, in this segment, what we're going to do is that we're going to have a dialogue. We're going to have a conversation here, but you feel free to join us as well. And your question, just raise your hand, and then Charmaine will come to you. Oh, a question, Lydia. Okay, so you can also go by Slido. All right, so we can also refer to Slido if that will help. All right, to have a conversation together, how psychiatry, psychologists, counselors can be involved in helping your church in dealing with mental health issues. All right, so Jasper has just spoken, so I'll give you a break first. Let me start with Dr. Leslie. All right, Dr. Leslie, maybe okay, why don't you introduce yourself? All right, let's start with Dr. Leslie. Introduce yourself briefly, and then Eating as well.
Good morning to everybody. Pleased to be here. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many of you, pastors. I'm Leslie Lim, a psychiatrist from the Singapore General Hospital. And I don't want to say too much about myself. I'm a consultant. I've been in psychiatry for more than 30 years. I did my MBBS in Singapore, I trained in London, and I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists.
Hi everyone, thanks to the organizers as well for inviting me here. It's really a great pleasure to be here to serve. So my name is Eating. I'm a clinical psychologist. I was a government psychologist working in the Ministry of Social and Family Development for more than a decade. And now I am out in the private practice, running my own group practice. So I think I'm a mother of two school-going children.
Okay, good. So let's start back with Dr. Leslie again, because just now there was a question. All right, how do you distinguish between demonization as opposed to mental health issue? All right, so there's a hot topic. Several of you have asked me that question. I've asked Dr. Leslie to talk about this because he have actually a whole book written on this topic. All right, so what better than to get the author himself to talk about this, right? So over to you, Dr. Leslie.
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Chua, for promoting my book. This is the latest edition of this book. I first wrote it in 2007, and the latest edition has come out in 2020, just before during the middle of the pandemic. And this book was written in response to this question: how do you distinguish between mental illness and demonization? I get asked this countless number of times, so I credit my wife for encouraging me to write this book.
Is she here?
She's serving her SHN. She would like to be, but she's serving SHN at the moment. We just came back from a trip to UK, where I attended the Royal College of Psychiatrists conference. And interestingly, the suicide rate in Britain has not climbed up as well. And they say that it's because of solidarity with each other to fight this pandemic, this common enemy, the pandemic, and also support from the government and financial help and so on and so forth. So back to this question, I like to say that my ideas are purely my own ideas. It may not resonate with some of you because this is a very wide and varied audience here today. So I'm just giving you my personal, my opinion, okay? You may take it or leave it if you like. How do you distinguish mental illness from demonization? I think you asked this question because you want to know what to do with the person in need. PIN, let's call him a PIN, person in need. Are you going to send him to a psychiatrist? Are you going to send him to a deliverance counselor? You want to know what to do with this person. So let me give you a very, very brief answer, okay? Demonization is on a spectrum. It's on a continuum. It doesn't mean you're demon-possessed. A Christian cannot be demon-possessed because the Holy Spirit possesses us. He lives in our heart. But we can be influenced by demons to varying levels. And demons cannot afflict us unless we open the door of our lives to demons. Okay, with regard to mental conditions, I would say that schizophrenia, delusional disorder, paranoid disorder, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorders are all biochemical, biological conditions, okay? Strictly speaking, there's nothing demonic or spiritual about them unless they open their doors of their lives to demons to come in. The other thing would be autism spectrum disorder, autism, dementia, head injury, stroke. These are all biochemical, biological, structural conditions of the brain. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is also biochemical, biological condition. At the other end of the spectrum, if you see somebody going into a trance, now according to DSM-5, there's a condition called dissociative disorder, trance condition, where you go into a trance. I had an army boy sent to me, and they thought he was fainting, that he was having an epileptic fit. I looked at him, he was in a trance. There was nothing epileptic about him. Epilepsy, addictions, okay, if somebody is very, very addicted, alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping. I wouldn't say shopping. A lot of people are addicted to shopping. I better stay away from the area. Most of you are females here. I'll get myself clobbered. Okay, but gambling, sex addiction, these are things. Eh? And you can counsel them, of course. I would say all of them are demonized. You can counsel them, but if they're willing to change and they're prepared to and they're responding, okay. But if they're not, they're very stubbornly still addicted, suspect there's some spiritual elements there, demonic elements there. Certain types of personality disorders, which are like borderline personality disorders. These are people with chronic sense of emptiness, fear of abandonment, frantic attempts to avoid abandonment, and repeated acts of self-harm, slashing, overdosing, wanting to die and so on, manipulating of others, and of course, antisocial personality disorder. You don't want these type of people to be in your church, right? Repeatedly flout the rules, disregard of authority and so on, addicted to alcohol, drugs and so on, sex and so on. Now, if you want to counsel somebody, you take a history from them, right? Coming from the perspective of a doctor, we take a history. As a counselor, I'm sure you take histories too. You find out from them, have they been dedicated to the gods or not? Many of them are dedicated in the temple, made to drink holy water, have charms and so on. Are they engaged in things like seeing mediums, going for fortune telling and so on? Tai Chi, Qigong, all these sort of things open the door to demonic spirits to come in. Okay. Now, when a person is depressed, now depression, you've got to be careful here because there's a biological element. Okay, you've got biological symptoms, appetite, sleep, energy problem. Sometimes there's psychotic symptoms, hearing things, and also having beliefs. Okay, delusions of persecution, delusions of ill health, poverty, guilt, and ill health. These psychotic symptoms, okay, they're biological. But when a person is depressed, he makes some suicide thinking, suicide wishes. I wish I were dead. I wish I went to sleep and never woke up. Life is so meaningless. Of course, he's expressing what he's feeling, but how do we know that some of these thoughts will be slipped in by the enemy? I used some of these symptoms as part of my examination of a person who's depressed. And I say yes, yes, yes to these 3 questions. Then I know they are feeling very depressed in their mood. But they could be demonic thoughts, okay? And the demons may influence them to commit suicide. Okay? If they are repeatedly having suicidal thoughts, they can't stop themselves, and they have this urge, strongly suspect there's something demonic going on. Certain emotions like bitter envy and jealousy is found in James chapter 3, verses 14 to 16. Okay, bitter envy and jealousy, something demonic there is, it says. So if a person refuses, you counsel them, they refuse to give up their jealous and feelings of hatred. It's called murder. King Saul is a very good example, right? He did not actually have to murder David, but he entertained this thought of murdering him because he was so jealous of him. And 3 times it's mentioned. 1 Samuel 16, chapter 18, chapter 19 says that the devil entered into Saul. 3 times he was mentioned. So suicide is a very demonic thing because Saul committed suicide. Same with Judas Iscariot. He took the bread from Jesus, Satan entered into him. At the end of Judas' life, he committed suicide. Then if you are talking to your counselee and they tell you they got bad dreams, frightening dreams and nightmares, strongly suspect the demonic element as well. Okay. I wanted to talk about slashing and all that. You remember Elijah, and he was telling the prophets of Baal, you cry louder to your God. Maybe he's sleeping, he's gone on holiday. So what did they do? They cried out and they used knives and they slashed themselves. So acts of self-harm are also very demonic. These are demonically, demon-possessed prophets of Baal. So this is a nutshell what I wanted to say to answer this question. There are a lot more I can say, but please buy the book and read it for yourself in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So maybe before we go further, I thought we need to do a clarification. What's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist? So just in case, because we've been throwing the word around, so maybe it's good for us to know what's the difference.
Psychiatrist is a T-R-I-S-T, right? T-R. So T-R sounds like D-R. D-R is a short form for doctor. So a psychiatrist is a doctor. Okay, he specializes in mental illness, a treatment of mental illness. Psychologist is not a doctor. He does all the rest. Counseling, psychotherapy, and so on.
We hear from a psychologist.
Maybe Dr. Tan wants to clarify. Wonderful.
I know what Dr. Lim means, okay? I'm doctor. I'm a doctor. A psychologist, you cannot say a psychologist is not a doctor. What you mean is that a psychologist is not a physician. You have to use the right word. But I'm a doctor with a PhD. No, seriously, in the United States, okay, you have to have a PhD or PsyD or ED. You have to be a doctor to be a psychologist, okay? Master's level doesn't count. That's the British system. So we have to be very careful. And we cannot say this is a real doctor, it's not a real doctor. A doctor is a doctor, okay? But he's a physician. That's different. There's a medical doctor. Medical doctor, yeah. Yeah, okay, so I'm not, Leslie's my good friend, okay? The difference is that a psychiatrist is a medical doctor with a medical specialty. He can prescribe medication and so on. Psychologists usually cannot. I say usually because some psychologists in the States have limited prescription privileges. Anyways, I'll stop there. I'm not.
And just for Singaporean awareness, switch, okay. So I use this, you all use this, okay? Just for our awareness, in Singapore, only the psychiatrist can diagnose mental health condition. It doesn't, so if you follow some of the proceeding in our cabinet. Okay, so let's hear from a clinical psychologist.
Do I answer this question again? No?
Okay, so we have answered the first question. I think I just want to follow up with this issue about stigma. Right, because stigma is very real, not just among church members, even among pastors. Sometimes we are very cautious about who we can say to and who we can't. So maybe I can hear from Yi-Ting to share with us how we can deal with this issue of stigma.
Yeah, I think stigma is a very important topic for us to talk about. But before I go to stigma, I'm just going to share some statistics from what I've gotten from the Singapore Mental Health Study that's conducted by IMH, and I think it's important to share the local context in terms of the prevalence of mental health disorders and also how many of these people are actually seeking help. Because from there, then we know what is causing all these problems of not seeking help. So just to cite that this study was done in 2016 before the pandemic. Okay, so before the pandemic in 2016, they did quite a big population study, and they found that out of every 100 people, there were about 6.5 people who can be diagnosed based on the DSM-5 full criteria that they have a mental disorder. Usually something like a mood disorder, anxiety disorder, and they even included things like alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse. So every 6 out of 100 people in Singapore in 2016 can be diagnosed with that. And then they found out of these 6 out of 100 people, okay, so imagine 6. Okay, so if you think about your own congregation of 100 people, 6 of them are diagnosable with a mental health condition.
You think about 12 to 20 years.
Yes. Yes. And this is, that's 2016. And if you think about moving forward, 2020 with the pandemic, we know that it has gone up a lot more, 2 times, 3 times, we don't know. But we are looking at that level at least, right? And then they also look at the help-seeking behaviors. The help-seeking behaviors out of these 6 people is that only 1 out of 6 persons actually sought help. It's not about asking them about their attitude about help-seeking, it is about looking at their behaviors that they actually sought help. So 1 out of 6 actually sought help. So what are we looking at? 5 out of these 6 people who are diagnosable with a mental disorder did not seek help. Okay, so we are looking at quite a big problem. There are people who need help, but they are not coming forward to get help. And I think from what we've been talking about, we know that help is there, right? We can help people. We hear about all the testimonies about how people, when they sought help, they received help, they got better. So there is really a gap in terms of the treatment gap. And then, of course, now we start looking, why are people not seeking help? Top reasons, one of the top reasons is cost. Yes, I think that's something, it doesn't mean that church can't do anything about cost. As much as Singaporeans, right, we say, hey, what is the government going to do about it? But what can we all do about it in terms of the cost? And a second top reason is that I think I can get better myself. And if you think about it, that is a stigma in its own, because we know that people with mental health disorders, they get better faster, they really recover better when there is this professional help, and even that non-professional lay counseling kind of help. So there's the stigma there.
Bring the mic near. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then the last reason is actually there was one reason that was very important. People were saying that they are not seeking help because they are worried what people will think about them if they found out that they sought help. And that's a real stigma, because what does it mean about people who are seeking help? Is it that they are weak? There's something not so good about them, there's certain qualities about them, that's why they have mental disorder. And that's why it's so important to talk about stigma. And to further localize it to Singapore context, right, is that when they look at this across the whole spectrum of, I think there were thousands of people in this study, they classify people into the different socioeconomic status. And what they found is that people of the lower economic status, lower educational level, they are more willing to seek help, as opposed to people who are highly educated. So what does that tell us about a meritocratic society also? That sometimes we maybe ascribe too much qualities to ourselves that, oh, we are successful, I'm educated. It means that I shouldn't have faced any mental health problems. And so then I should be able to try to get myself okay, I don't really need help. And that is the real stigma that we are talking about. And that's why I think today, I think earlier on in the talk earlier, I think we talk so much about stigma. What do we mean by stigma? And I'm so glad with the 2 pastors who actually shared their testimonies today. I think that's a way of actually breaking down the stigma. I'm just going to move forward, okay, to talk about some thoughts I have about how we can break down this stigma. And I think one amazing thing was that I think now in the community of pastors, as you hear how other pastors were also struggling, and they managed to find ways to help themselves overcome it, I think that in itself is very liberating, that you're not alone. And I think likewise for your whole congregation, you think about the statistics, 6 out of 100. Okay, how many of them need this message as well, that it's okay to have mental health problems, but there is help available, there's no judgment, but there is support we can give you. So that's actually one very important, I think, message that can be actually given out. Whether it's true saying that over the pulpit, I think it's also very localized, right? I think it's how much do you hang out? How do you bring that message across? And also the other thing is about how do you set up maybe certain groups of support within the church? I think there are 2 main groups that I think I want to point out, at least based on my own experience. The young people. I think the young people, I think statistics-wise, looking at the suicide ideations, looking just worldwide trends, they are really a group that really needs help. And they are also more open. They are more open to talk about the mental health. I think this is really a great group to start. The other group is also about caregivers, because we also know that there's a whole aging tsunami, right? There's going to be lots and lots of caregivers who are going to be caring for people who are suffering, and they are suffering as well. So what can we do to help this group, to destigmatize that it's okay. You know, I've seen caregivers who come in and say, you know, it's so tiring taking care of my husband. But I feel so bad I'm actually seeking help. I feel so bad that I'm not even at home with him now. But she needs respite, she needs that relief and the support. So I think that's something that I want to say about the stigma.
Thanks. So I'd like to cover the testimony. So for some of you pastors, you may not be ready to talk about your own journey. You can quote so I like. Right? So these are ways that you can need to help your church to know that you can talk about this subject. The church can be a safe place. We're talking about caregivers. You must stay back for lunch, okay? Caregiver Alliance will be here to present to you what they are doing. Okay? So let me just turn now to Jasper. Tell us from all your research, what else can the church do to destigmatize this whole mental health issue?
Yeah, so I think if I may refer back to the statistics that I shared earlier, just want to be careful that, you know, I think what Eating mentioned is correct. The overall suicide rate may be dropping, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done, right? It's not something that we should call for celebration. But I highlighted the youth because youth is on the rise, right, the trend, okay? And in our survey, in our national survey, we also find something very interesting, that the more educated people, they felt that, yes, suicide can be prevented, there is help, and they can seek help. But Yi-Ting also pointed out a very interesting point, is that, are they seeking help? Right? I think this is something to do with, I don't know, culture or the stigma that we are talking about, right? So they know that, you know, it can be prevented, they need to seek help, but whether or not they take that action is another issue. And coming back to Pastor Seng's question about what can we do in church, I think, and to resonate what Yi-Ting said, I think we can start young. Children are very open to all this. You know, last year in our church, we started this. We have this session on mental health quiz. And it was a very interesting question. We don't have to make it very serious, right? It's a serious topic, but it can be very fun for the young to learn about what is it all about, and what can we do, and how can they do, and things like that. And it's very interactive. Try it out with our church, with our Sunday school, right? You know, and you can see the marvelous outcome that you can get the responses from all these young kids. It's one way to start, and if you need help, I'm sure focus on the family, caregiver alliance, caring for life. You know, all these people can help, right? Even SOS, we are able to, you know, provide that structure for you to use. So you can start small and start young, and it progress. And when the young start to know this, it's probably easier to educate the older one, right?
Okay, so since we are talking about young people, so I'm going to end the first question with young people. What would you be able to comment on you being turned off when the mental health issues are being spiritualized?
I'm just going to speak for some youths that I work with who are also coming from Christian families. I think I'll just say that in the family environment, a lot of times what parents will love their children to be God-loving also. But I think in the midst of trying to steer their children towards being God-loving, they may inadvertently cause their children to be not close to them. Through whatever things that they say to the children. And I find that that's very heartbreaking, because I think a lot of children, they want to get the approval of their parents. They would love to follow God's word, but they really, really struggle. And in the environment whereby they don't feel that they can be accepted in whatever that they're going through, it makes, and when parents keep just kind of saying, oh, but God says you cannot be like this. You know, it's not right, you're a Christian, you should be like that. It actually pushes the children away, and it really diminishes that opportunity for the parents to influence their children even more. So I think if I were to give a comment on that, I think in the end, we talk about cells and a loving community being that place of accepting people. I think we go to the smaller microcosm, it is the family itself, the family unit. Can parents provide that kind of love, that unconditional love, regardless of what their children's thoughts are going through? Because sometimes it can be phasal, sometimes it might be a longer period of time, but can parents still steer their children without having to say, giving them rules and laws? In the end, it's about the love, it's about the relationship that turns the children back to God.
Yeah. So what you just said applying to parents, I think it also applies to spiritual authorities and all that.
Yes.
Right? Because I think even for adults, we also don't like our condition being spiritualized, right? You're getting weight, you must be not praying too much, we all like that too, right? So I think that the same. We need to gain knowledge and awareness. Yes, I know Leslie is going to say something else.
I fully agree with my Eating here. I think we need to stress that mental conditions have got some biochemical problem. So if you spiritualize it, you're actually adding guilt onto the person. And say that you're not being spiritual, that's why you're feeling this way. And I think we heard from a pastor today, he was depressed and he didn't feel like he was close to God, It's not that he's demonized or anything, or he's being less spiritual or anything, just his biochemistry is gone haywire. So you see, our body is so complex. What more our brain is even more complex. And so anything can go wrong. It's just like a car, a very complicated piece of machinery. Anything can go wrong. Same with our brains. So if you spiritualize it, you're making them feel worse, making them feel more guilty. So I agree with Eating, absolutely.
Thank you. Anything to add? No? Okay. Let me take this last question, because of time. Since we have a psychiatrist here, how do you differentiate between mental health issue from... No. Okay. How can we better support members with psychosis? And what's ASD? Let the psychiatrist explain.
How can we better support members with psychosis? Let's talk about psychosis first, because ASD is not my area of specialty, autism spectrum disorder. Psychosis, there are many support groups, right? A lot of charitable organizations, SAMH, SACS, and the booths outside, they all support people with psychotic conditions and mental health conditions. So I think you can go to all these resources for help. ASD, I'm sure there are support groups. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph. Yeah, there are, right? Support groups for ASD.
Autism Resource Center.
Autism Resource Center, yeah. Pathlight, right? Pathlight, and so on. So there are support groups available.
If you don't know who to ask Dr. Joseph Young. Yeah. Right? So in our prayer meeting, we actually a lot of people who are involved in all these areas support group. Tina, I know she's here. Tina and Carol, they are also doing a support group for children with autism. All right? All right. Thank you very much. Can we go around applause for all our attendees?